Hey guys, and welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about the Triple Trouble Wurm event. This is something I would have loved to include in my world boss guide, but I struggled to get footage, mostly because I couldn't figure out when to be here. For those of you guys out there that are a little bit unfamiliar with this, there is a world boss that spawns in Bloodtide Coast with 3 giant worm heads that you'll have to split into 3 groups to take down. This event takes a lot of people, as you have to split into those 3 groups, and requires you to complete it a minimum of 3 times to get all the achievements. Anyway guys, we got a lot to cover here, so let's get started. You'll need to head over to Firthside Vigil Waypoint in the Bloodtide Coast, and this is where all of the escort events will take place, leading you to each of the worms. It's here that you'll need to amass a ton of people so you can split into 3 groups to take down each worm. Because you have to split into these 3 groups, it's a good idea to know which worm you want to defeat before you get here. As for when you need to be here, I honestly wish I had some better information for you guys. After Googling and asking around, I only managed to find one timer that seemed to be reliable, at least for me. According to this timer, this event spawns every 4 hours. Anytime I've used this timer, it's worked out for me, but keep in mind I've only done this about 4 times total. I'll be sure to leave a link in the description for the timer I've used, but if for some reason this doesn't work out, a good backup is always to check the Looking for Group tool under World Bosses to see if anybody's running this event. Alternatively, if you're part of a larger guild, I know guilds can summon this event as well. Additionally, if you are following that 4-hour timer, be sure to show up a little bit earlier than when the event starts, as these maps tend to fill up quickly. So now that we got the when and where out of the way, we can finally talk about the event itself. As it gets closer and closer to the start of the event, you should see people breaking into 3 groups. The group you choose determines the escort mission you'll have to do to get to the boss, as well as the boss itself. I'll be sure to put up a graphic so that you can see where each one starts and which one you'll be headed to. So once you've decided on which worm you'd like to slay, be sure to join up with the squad that's headed that way. If you're new to squads, just right-click on somebody's name who's in the squad, usually the commander, and click Join Squad. You may notice this squad group will create a subgroup for players doing the escort. If you're going for all achievements, be sure to be in that group, or at least with those players. So for this guide, we're going to start with the Amber Worm and the Amber Worm Escort, but keep in mind that this is pretty much the same no matter which one you pick. In fact, it's nightmarishly similar to basically every escort event you've done in Guild Wars 2. For this one, we'll be defending Crusader Zep as we make our way to the Amber Worm. Groups of larvae and jungle worms will spawn, you just need to keep him alive and get him to the boss area. Along this path though, you should be mindful of all the worm eggs that you can destroy, as it'll take 30 of these before you can get your first achievement. Every escort event has these worm eggs along the path, so don't worry if you don't get all 30 your first go. Eventually, you'll come up on a Plague Carrier Abomination. You'll know him when you see him because he's pretty large and he has a symbol above his head. Defeating the Abomination will put a small white circle on the ground, and you'll need to stand in that for your second achievement. For this, I would recommend waiting until as many people as possible are around the Abomination before killing it so everyone can get the achievement. From here, it's just a matter of fending off worms and getting the Crusader to the boss area. There may be a bit of downtime between when you get there and when the actual event starts, as you're waiting for everyone else to complete their escort missions as well. But soon enough, the Amber Worm will spawn. For this fight, you'll be required to kill an abomination when it comes by, stand in the white circle like before, and then over near the giant Amber Worm so that he will eat you. Once inside, you can pick up a harpoon and attack his insides until he spits you back out. Being spit out by the Amber Worm will give you your 3rd achievement. Back outside the worm with your harpoon, wait until your commander calls for it, and then fire the harpoon to make the worm vulnerable. This worm, like all 3 worms, will do a dodge move that hits really hard, so be sure to be wary of that. After the dodge, you and your entire team can rush the worm and do as much damage as possible. The rest of the fight is going to go just like this, but before we discuss defeating these worms, I want to move on to each one and explain their mechanics before explaining how to finally defeat these guys once and for all. So for now, let's go on to the Cobalt Worm. As you might have expected, the escort mission is pretty much the same. This time we'll be defending Crusader Zoot, And again, we'll just be moving him through some jungle worms, trying to kill eggs when we can to get the 30 egg achievement. Eventually, you'll come up on a small island, and there'll be a bottle of rum you can drink. Drinking that rum is your 4th achievement. From here, like before, it's just a matter of keeping the escort alive until you get to the boss area. Once there, wait for everyone to catch up, and now it's time to fight the Cobalt Worm. The mechanic here is to make sure the worm eats 20 explosive barrels that you have to bring to him before he finally becomes vulnerable and you can attack. There are 3 separate areas that contain these barrels, each of which with their own difficulty. The difficulty comes from taking the barrel back to the worm without first falling in the water. Falling in the water ruins the barrel, and you'll have to do it all over again. The first barrel location isn't really all that difficult. It's all on dry land, so you don't have to worry about anything there. The second most difficult is directly in front of the boss, and you'll have to jump on a few floating boxes before you can get to a barrel, and then back again to place the barrel. And the most difficult requires you to walk on a very thin piece of wood, and you may even need to fight off some pirates who will hit you while you're trying to make these jumps, putting you into combat and making it all the more difficult. So the gist of this fight is taking 20 barrels over to the worm eats the barrels, they explode, and he becomes vulnerable. It's at this point you're going to want to rush in with your team and do as much damage as you can. Placing 5 barrels in front of the Cobalt Worm is how you get your 5th achievement. From here it's pretty rinse and repeat like before, so let's just move on to the Crimson Worm. Again, we'll be escorting another Crusader, this time Crusader Yip. And no surprise, it's time to kill some jungle worms and attack as many eggs as you can. Right before you enter the area where you can actually fight the Crimson Worm, there'll be a phytotoxin cloud heading straight for you. Allow that cloud to hit you and you'll get your 6th achievement. The area surrounding where the Crimson Worm will spawn has 3 points that you should get familiar with while you're waiting for the other escort groups to complete. Each one of these points is referred to as a phytotoxin extractor, and each one has a different color above it, either red, blue, or yellow. When the fight starts, you'll see clouds of phytotoxin on the ground, and running through those will apply it to you, and then you running to one of the extractors will get rid of that, filling up the gauge. It is possible to hold multiples of these, and if you manage to get all 3 at the same time, you'll get your 7th achievement. So for the fight itself, you need to fill each one of these with phytotoxin, and once you do that, the worm will become vulnerable. That's when everyone can run in and pounce on him and do as much damage as possible. Every group I ran with seemed to just run around the worm in a giant circle, counterclockwise from the worm, picking up phytotoxins whenever possible, and dropping them off as they made the loop around the worm. Each of the jungle worms will periodically do a big spin attack, but this worm seems to do it more than the others, at least in my experience. If you can manage to dodge one of these, that'll be your 8th achievement. And I recommend doing it on the Crimson Worm, as it just seemed to come up a lot more. So now you know the mechanics for all 3 worms. Eventually, you're going to get pretty close to killing these worms by repeating these steps. The reason I waited until now to explain this is it's the same for every worm, and also something you should be conscious of when you're playing this event. Defeating a jungle worm causes its head to disconnect from its body and flop around on the ground. From here, it's really just a matter of doing the last bit of damage on his new health bar. The common tactic I've seen is trying to keep the worm up against a wall so that he can't flop around nearly as much as he can if you let him go crazy. Finishing off the rest of the head's health bar will win this for you, but as I said before, there's something I want you to be conscious of when playing this event. Firstly, at the start of the fight, you have 14 minutes to decapitate a worm. Once any one of the 3 worms has been decapitated, whatever time is remaining on the clock turns to 1 minute. This is where a little bit of strategy on your commander's part will have to come through. You'll be able to see the health bar of each worm, so it's pretty easy to tell how far along everyone is. But if it seems like one group is falling behind, the commander will often tell everyone to stop attacking. This allows the other group or groups to play catch up. You'll wait until everyone's very close to decapitating their worm, and then the commander will give the go-ahead to resume things as before. This part can be difficult for the Crimson Worm, as you have to avoid filling one of the 3 extractors until just before everyone's ready to decapitate their worm. Also worth mentioning is that once a worm has been decapitated, the timer becomes 2 minutes to defeat the worm's decapitated head. This is usually pretty attainable, but I think that's something you should know going into it so you don't waste any time. If all 3 groups manage to finish up in the last 2-minute timer, congratulations, you've actually completed this event. Now you'll have to run it 2 more times. That is, if you want the mastery points and achievements that come with this. Fully defeating each one of the jungle worms will get you another achievement, and as long as you manage to get enough eggs slain through your 3 runs, you should have all 10 achievement points necessary for the main Triple Trouble achievement. This will get you the title Triple Trouble, as well as a mastery point. If during any of your runs all 3 groups manage to clear their worm, you'll get yet another mastery point. And on top of that, if you look in the achievements pane under bosses, each one of the Triple Trouble worms is its own mastery point, bringing you to a grand total of 5 mastery points for this whole charade. And guys, that is the Triple Trouble guide. I truly wish I had some more insight as far as when this thing spawns so that I could give you guys something a little bit more concrete. But like I said, that timer has been working for me. If you guys end up using that timer to some amount of success, feel free to verify it down in the comments so we can get some kind of solidarity going for this thing. Being conscious of all the achievements before you go in is really good. For instance, I managed to complete the entire achievement track in just 3 runs. I ended up doing a 4th run for a little bit better footage, but my achievements were already done. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped someone out there, maybe like me, who had seen this go into the game, but hadn't really tried it until recently. The fight itself is so much fun, guys. I would give it a go. And I'll see you in the next one.